Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, November the 21st, 2025. Today there is an opposition aspect between the Sun and Uranus, and I think this aspect could be quite important, and I do want to talk about it. But before I go into details about the Sun-Uranus opposition, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, November the 21st, 2025. And here is the chart set for noon, New York time on Friday. And you can see that the moon is very much in Sagittarius. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. Oh, now you might be asking, why is Emmanuel Macron on the thumbnail? Reason is that I think that this Sun-Uranus opposition might have an impact on him, but more about that later. So as far as the moon is concerned, yes, it is in Sagittarius. It's right in the middle of Sagittarius, and it's making a conjunction to Mars. So moon conjunct Mars can be exciting, certainly not a boring aspect, and it's in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a sign which can be very honest and upfront, and with moon and Mars together in Sagittarius, we might be very eager to tell people, how we feel, what we think, and our responses can be, very immediate. And as honesty might be a theme for today, then we need to be able to handle honesty and not get upset if we're told something we don't want to hear. But at the same time, if we ourselves want to be honest, it might be a good idea to give some thought to what the implications might be. And so that Moon Mars conjunction, I think that you could say that it does define the day, and it can be aggressive, and it can be very very clear, can be argumentative. And you have to remember that Sagittarius is a fast-moving sign, and just because someone gets upset about something one moment, well, the next moment things can completely change. And aside from that, the Sun makes an opposition to Uranus. It also makes a trine to Neptune. So we've had this Uranus-Neptune sextile, which is something I have already discussed. It's quite a cosmic aspect. It's about sort of higher level stuff, maybe things we don't entirely understand, but it can also be about realizations. We just suddenly understand the way things are, or the cosmos makes its influence felt in no uncertain terms. And once we have that revelation, it's very difficult to step back from it. And so, as far as the Sun opposition Uranus is concerned, I do think that the Sun opposition Uranus is more important than Sun trine Neptune. Sun opposition Uranus is dramatic, and it's an opposition. So Sun opposition Uranus can be about something happening that might appear dramatic, or it could also be about our responses or someone else's response. With Sun opposition Uranus, we need to respond, and the Sun and Uranus are both in fixed signs, and so with Sun opposition Uranus, there can be a degree of toughness there, not wanting to compromise, not wanting to budge, being very focused on one's individuality. It's important to me to be a rebel. I have to be a rebel, and I have to be rebellious in my own way, and I don't care how much damage that causes. So that's one way of looking at Sun opposition Uranus, but it can be just a good aspect for shaking things up. Sometimes people get complacent and they assume that the old ways are the best ways, but sometimes they're not the best ways, and it may be down to us to cause a stir. Now, Sun trine Neptune we shouldn't necessarily see Sun opposition Uranus and Sun trine Neptune as being two completely different aspects. You could argue that they're part of the same complex. And, with Sun trine Neptune, a rather different message than Sun opposition Uranus. I mean, Sun trine Neptune, it's an aspect which is it's in water signs. And so in water signs, it's quite emotional, it's quite fluid. It is maybe very different from Sun opposition Uranus in one sense, because I don't think there's anything fluid about Sun opposition Uranus. I mean, Sun opposition Uranus is very definite in fixed signs. This is the way I want it. Sun trine Neptune is maybe able to deal with change and with variety and something happening that we weren't necessarily expecting, and there can be a sort of a spiritual side to it. And so if you put Sun opposition Uranus and Sun trine Neptune together, you look at these three planets as a combination, then you might say that Sun is in some respects bringing Uranus and Neptune down to earth, and it's giving us the capacity to create change. We see something. You know how it is when you see something. You see something and you kind of don't want to see it, but once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, and that can make you nervous. And what do? Well, you have to accept the truth. The truth may just suddenly be staring you in the face, and then you've got to do something, and you may have to make some changes. So that's what's going on today. It's kind of quite a concentrated picture. Just Moon conjunct Mars, Sun opposition Uranus, Sun trine Neptune, and there are other aspects which may not be quite as exact, but I think it is a very definite day, and it is a day when there could be some drama. And we've just had the new moon. We had a new moon yesterday in Scorpio, and so this sort of builds on it. And we shouldn't forget as well that the Sun is still pretty close to Mercury. In fact, the Sun is getting ready actually to move into Sagittarius. So as far as when the Sun does move into Sagittarius, I think it's Sun moves into Sagittarius at 1:36 tomorrow. So if you are in the Americas, it doesn't matter where in the Americas, even in Chile or eastern Brazil, yesterday evening, Thursday evening is when the Sun moves into Sagittarius. But if you're not in the Americas, then it'll be Friday. But the Sun moves into Sagittarius. I don't know about Iceland. I don't know if any of you are in Iceland. Maybe it's just before midnight that the Sun makes that change. So that's the picture in the US, or set for New York. And turning to Sydney, Australia, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is still in Sagittarius. There's still a Moon-Mars conjunction, and so I don't think that there's going to be a huge amount of difference between one's experience in Australia or New Zealand and the US and all the places in between. I think there's going to be a certain uniformity of experience. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun it's in the center of the solar system. Now, remember that the Earth in a heliocentric chart is always exactly opposition where the Sun is. So we've got the Sun at 29 Scorpio. That means by definition that the Earth is going to be at 29 Taurus. Likewise, if you have an opposition involving the Sun in the heliocentric, in a geocentric chart, it's going to be shown as a conjunction with the Earth in the heliocentric chart. So we see that there is an exact Earth-Uranus conjunction today, because by definition there is an exact Sun opposition Uranus. So I like the idea of the conjunction with the Earth. It's kind of more grounded. It's more real. It just gives us an idea of what it's all about. You imagine you are where the sun is, and you are looking around you at the planets swirling around, and you see that the Earth and Uranus are in the same place. So that Earth is affected by this gas giant Uranus. Well, affected when you've got arguments about causation and correlation, but it tells us something, that the Earth is next to Uranus, and it just could be that the experience down here on planet Earth is rather turbulent. It is rather sort of Uranian. Things are not necessarily going to run smoothly. But on the plus side, there could be excitement, things going on, things to amuse us and also to inspire us. And the sun is, the Earth is, having made that conjunction to Uranus, will move into Gemini, because we know the sun's moving into Sagittarius heliocentrically, so that means the Earth is about to move into Gemini. And there it will make sextiles to Saturn and Neptune. We're already starting to feel those sextiles between the Earth and Saturn and Neptune. And that might be about trying to make sense of the drama that is shown by Uranus. At the same time, we've got a square between Venus and Pluto. So Venus-Pluto square, when you've got it heliocentrically, it can be quite obsessive about other people, wanting to perhaps control other people. Who's trying to control who? That is a good question, although there may be other ways of looking at it. Venus square Pluto may say something about style and how we appear and how people want to appear. And it's a heliocentric aspect, so it is very collective. And so when making one's choices about what what one looks like, one may be influenced by these sort of cosmic forces, which are quite difficult to understand, but they are nonetheless very real. So now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, November the 21st, 2025. Aries. So Aries, we have got stuff going on in Sagittarius. Mars, your ruler, is in Sagittarius, and the moon is conjunct Mars. And I think that is going to make you, quite dynamic. You're kind of rediscovering your dynamism, which you might have briefly lost, but now it's very much there, and you are in a position where you can assert yourself, and you can move from place to place. You don't have to be stuck. You don't have to regard anything as a conflict. If you feel you want to move from one place to another, it's not about having an argument. It's just something you just do. After all, if Aries wants to do something, Aries just goes and does it. That's the way it is, isn't it? And so do make the most of it. There's no need, though, to be angry or to feel that you have to prove any point. It's just really completely unnecessary. The more you express your freedom, the more you accept your freedom, the happier you'll be, and I think also the happier everyone else will be as well. And at the same time as this, we do have the Sun opposition Uranus. Now, this Sun opposition Uranus is an important aspect. It is likely to affect everyone, but in different ways. And, with this Sun opposition Uranus, you may find that, yeah, there are things that make you annoyed, that you feel you have to respond to. And it could be about money. I mean, it's simple as that. You are not someone that is obsessed about money, but sometimes the financial dimension just makes itself felt, and you just feel that you've got no choice. You've got to do something. You've got to say something. And it might be that someone is talking about money in a way that you regard as being quite inappropriate. It's not really something you wanted to hear. But if someone brings up the issue of money, yeah, you will be in the mood to respond. And you would like to keep it simple. But it's going to be difficult to keep it simple. Once the financial arena sort of is manifest, once the lights get turned on, you can see what's going on, or at least you're very aware of what's going on. You may not be sure about the details of what's happening, but once you start to see what's happening, you are going to want to get involved, and you're going to want to understand more. And perhaps, Aries, it is a good time to be asking questions about money. Maybe someone assumed you weren't interested, or they assumed they could make decisions on your behalf. But perhaps you need to ask questions, and if you do ask questions, you really should expect answers. But I'm not suggesting that you are sort of totally ill-disciplined. I mean, you could be ill-disciplined. You might feel that you just have to make everything happen at once. You want answers. You want people to respond, and there just might be no structure, and it could disintegrate into chaos if you're not careful. But I don't think it need disintegrate into chaos. I think that if you put your mind to it, Aries, you can really sort of create order. You can make things happen as you want them to happen. And if you're not happy about something, then at some level you can make it go away, or you can make it sort of less important. And you might realize that certain scenes have outlived their usefulness. You enjoyed them in the past, but things have changed, and it may be time for you to change. And it just could be, Aries, are just a time to just leave. Isn't there that sort of 60s phrase? I'm not quite sure where it came from. It's sort of bad scene, cats, let's fade. And so maybe that's how you're going to feel, that if it's a bad scene, well, time for Aries to move on. Taurus, Sun opposition Uranus. It's all part of the same drama. We had yesterday a new moon in Scorpio, in your opposite sign, and now we've got Sun opposition Uranus. Again, Sun in your opposite sign, Uranus in your sign, and it really does highlight you. It's about what you want to do. It's also about the things that might perhaps be holding you back, and you might also just feel that you maybe have to respond, that there just isn't any choice. But you mustn't be in too much of a hurry to respond. I mean, this Sun opposition Uranus can be a dramatic aspect, and it can be made dramatic by the way people respond to it. They may feel they have to do something. They may have to assert their individuality, regardless of the cost. And while you are important, your particular view of the world is important, how important is it really? Does it need to be the source of an argument? And perhaps it doesn't have to be. And so maybe, Taurus, you can afford to be a little more relaxed, though there's no doubt, Taurus, that at the moment you do have a lot of energy. There are a lot of things that are going on. There are a lot of things you want to do, and you want to, make it happen, right now. And if you try to force the pace, with Sun opposition Uranus, you might find that things get out of control, and that's not necessarily what you want to do. It's good to be an individual, but individuality can be sometimes taken too far. And also, Taurus, it just could be a time where you find yourself making things too complicated, almost sort of unbearably complicated. You want to look at things, and you want to look at things again and again and again. And if you're making things complicated, then someone else might be making things complicated as well. And there just could be disagreements. And what is it all about? And I think that what it is all about is being too much energy. And if you've got a lot of energy, you might just feel you have to apply it. You may not even know what you're doing. You just do something which gets a reaction. And if you can't do something, then you might be sort of waiting for someone else to do something, and they do something, and then you might respond to them in a particular way, and it just could so easily get out of hand. And so perhaps you should give people a chance, and not necessarily jump to conclusions, and just let things play out. And even if you feel that you're being pressured, perhaps you don't feel you don't have enough power, or someone is telling you what to do, even in that kind of situation, it just might be a good idea if you were to wait it out up to a point. There may come a point today, Taurus, when you just feel you have to do something. You have to take action. But just a bit of subtlety might be worthwhile. And as far as relationships are concerned, we looked at the heliocentric chart, and heliocentrically, Venus is square Pluto, and so Venus square Pluto aspect can be about you and other people. It might be that with certain people you feel a lack of comfort because maybe they're trying to have too much control over you. I don't know whether that's true or not, but you might just have that perception that if you don't assert yourself, then you just might lose touch with everything, and it might just be someone else calling the shots, and that's obviously not something you want. But at the same time, you don't want to take things too far, and you don't want to exaggerate. And maybe the best way of dealing with Venus square Pluto is to be very aware of your own boundaries, and also be aware of your own power. You are powerful in your own right, and maybe you don't have to make a big sort of exhibition of it. You can just be yourself and not regard things as a struggle, and maybe that's the way through. And you just don't want that Sun opposition Uranus to demonstrate its negativity, because there is a negative side to that Sun opposition Uranus, and just could be about having a disagreement or just being too opinionated, and it just doesn't lead anywhere useful. Gemini. There is a grand trine involving Mercury and Jupiter and Neptune. It's something I hadn't really noticed, but it's there. And, here it is. Mercury is at 26 Scorpio, 26 or 27 Scorpio, and it's trine Jupiter and it's trine Neptune. And, so, Uranus is on the Jupiter-Neptune midpoint. So, this is, quite a surprising thing. At least it's surprising for me. I wasn't kind of expecting it, but it was kind of obvious. I perhaps should have been more observant. So, Mercury is, back in Scorpio. I don't know how you're feeling about Mercury back in Scorpio, but, Scorpio is an emotional sign. He's sort of more emotional than Sagittarius. and you may perhaps be aware of some of the surrounding complications. People have to be taken seriously, and yeah, sure, their emotions need to be taken seriously as well. And this is not a time for sort of ill-disciplined behavior. Things do have to be taken slowly, and you have to accept that other people have their limitations. So that is one way of looking at it with Mercury in Scorpio. But there's no doubt that there are things happening with this grand trine, and on an emotional level, you may feel that there's a growing power, and it's a power that could have a certain amount of sort of optimism. You may be aware that things are changing, but things might be changing for the better. And if you've got Mercury making a trine to both Jupiter and Neptune, that is certainly optimistic. When you think about Jupiter and Neptune as a pair, you might think about the belief that things are going to be okay, the belief that somehow luck is on your side, that it's all going to work out. And of course, that is a very human belief. And with Mercury aspecting both Jupiter and Neptune, there is certainly some danger of being over-optimistic or drifting off into fantasy. And that's clearly not something you want to do. You mustn't assume that something is suddenly going to go your way. What do they call it? Is that main character syndrome? That's a phrase that comes up a lot, main character syndrome. I don't know how long people have been talking about main character syndrome. I've noticed it probably for the last 6 months, people using it. And so as I understand it, main character syndrome is about thinking that we are special, that somehow we are the main character in a film, therefore like main characters in films, we're going to be lucky. The probabilities and statistics don't need to work for us. We can be the one that bucks the trend. And so that could be a problem. Just being over-optimistic, thinking we're too special. Sometimes Geminis can think that they're rather special. I mean, I'm not saying that you aren't special, but don't exaggerate the probabilities. It's always a good idea to think about probabilities and statistics, and not to think there's any particular reason why you have to be successful and be more successful than others when logically everyone's got the same chance. So not a good day for speculative thinking with Mercury on a Jupiter-Neptune midpoint. But from a positive note, Jupiter and Neptune can be a pair of planets relating to transcendence, believing that something exists, having faith. And sometimes Geminis can find it quite difficult to have faith. Now, I think that faith can lead to a lot of problems, but maybe it's okay to have faith, provided faith takes place in the right setting. I think that if you're talking about faith, it has to be faith in the spiritual, because faith essentially is a spiritual concept. It's not about the real world. So if you believe that something exists, that something is there for you, then fair enough. But if you have faith that there will be a particular material result going your way, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. I think that is dangerous, and you might be putting yourself in a situation where you just don't have control. You don't feel you need control. You're just going to assume that everything's going to work out. And if you make that assumption, then you might be disappointed. But it's not, but it's going to be a disappointing day. But it might sometimes feel disappointed, perhaps because your expectations are too high. And if your expectations are too high, that might encourage you not to put in the work where the work is actually required. And another thing going on is we have got a conjunction between the Moon and Mars. And this Moon-Mars conjunction is in Sagittarius. It's in your opposite sign. And, this conjunction may highlight certain relationships. The energy is happening somewhere else. It's with another person. And, we could be talking about a person who is opinionated, Moon conjunct Mars in Sagittarius. Someone who has strong feelings, who is not afraid to articulate those feelings. So, when dealing with other people, bear in mind that, they might have a relatively low threshold in terms of anger and annoyance. And so, just don't be controversial for the sake of it, and really try to understand what is going on, and also accept that your own view of things may not be 100%. Mercury is making these trines to Jupiter and Neptune. It's also quite close to the Sun. Now the Sun is moving away from Mercury, so Mercury is not totally combust, and certainly when the Sun moves into Sagittarius, which could be this evening if you're in the Americas, when the Sun moves into Sagittarius, things will get easier. You'll have a greater level of objectivity. But just right now, you might not be able to see things for what they are, and you might focus on the wrong things. You might even get obsessed about the wrong things. You might think something is really important, something really has to be done, but in fact there's something else that needs to be done. So Gemini, if you find yourself putting a lot of effort into something and you really want to get it right, ask yourself, is that what needs to be done? Maybe there's something else that needs to be done. Maybe you don't want to do it, but that's the important task. So in terms of your priorities, it's important. It really does matter that you get things right. And just because you want to do something doesn't necessarily mean that is the right thing to do. So ask yourself, what really is the most important thing to do, even if you don't necessarily want to do it. And that might be the best way to make efficient use of your time. Cancer. The Moon is now in Sagittarius, completely in Sagittarius, and with the Moon in Sagittarius, it gives you a good insight into what's happening, what's gone wrong, what's going right, and where your energies and your efforts are required. You don't want to be everywhere. You can't be everywhere. You have to be where you are needed. And there are certain things which maybe haven't been done properly. They need some repair. They need some support. Whatever it is. And with this conjunction between Moon and Mars in Sagittarius, you're just going to know. If you give yourself a chance, you just know where to be, and you'll know what is required of you. And so Cancer, I think that you can be someone who is very useful, and in certain situations you could be something like, what do they call it, a troubleshooter, someone who can go in, sort a problem out, then once the problem is sorted out, you can move somewhere else. It's something you're going to be very good at today. So if anyone's got a problem, it's not working out, they don't know what to do, you're just the person. It'll just be fairly obvious to you. But with Moon conjunct Mars, there are different ways of looking at it. And one way of looking at sort of Moon conjunct Mars just could be that Mars is going to be quite influential, and you might find yourself becoming very energetic to the point where you just could get annoyed if anyone tries to block you, and You might have absolute ideas about the way things should be done, and if things are not done properly, you might be inclined to make a fuss. But I'm not sure if that's a good idea. You've got to give people some scope for making mistakes. I mean, particularly if they're sort of minor mistakes, and just because someone makes a mistake, if it's a small mistake, doesn't mean that you have to criticize them. And so that's one aspect of what's going on today. We also have an opposition between the Sun and Uranus, and this Sun-Uranus opposition, is to an extent a continuation of the new moon. So we had this new moon at sort of 28 Scorpio yesterday. Now we've got Sun opposition Uranus at sort of 29 Scorpio, Sun at 29 Scorpio, Uranus at 29 Taurus. And so this opposition might be about what is important to you. What matters in terms of you feeling useful and productive, and also happy, just happy doing something that is just meant for you. Only you can do it, and if other people can do it, well, probably you can do it better than them. So what is it? And if you have an insight into what you can do well, then stick with it, and don't allow other people to knock you off course. Other people might want attention. That's what Sun opposition Uranus can be about. Things happening that you weren't expecting, people doing things that you really hadn't anticipated, and it's so easy, Cancer, to just drop everything and respond to the problem. But sometimes you have to not panic. And if you're involved in something and you're enjoying it and it's working well, don't stop. I don't think that's not needed. Instead, see it through to completion, and then you can worry about what other people are saying, what other people want from you. But you don't want to be too much at other people's disposal, because that's not a happy result. And it is important today that you are respected. Leo, the Sun is opposition Uranus. That is the main aspect of the day. Oh, it's also trine Neptune. So maybe Sun opposition Uranus, Sun trine Neptune. Maybe it's just part of the entire complex or at least of the complex involving Sun, Uranus, and Neptune. You've got Sun opposition Uranus, and you've got Neptune making a trine to the Sun and a sextile to Uranus. And so this aspect is, I think, quite motivating. It reminds you of, what you want to do, what you want to, achieve, and don't allow yourself to be too distracted. Part of your job is to be an individual. Individuality matters, and it will continue to matter, while Uranus is moving through Taurus between now and the end of April. And so this individuality, it just could be connected with your ambitions and how you want to do things, how you want to do a job, how you want to conduct your business. It is kind of unique to you, and you maybe over the next few months have to work out what does make you special. But with the Sun opposition Uranus, there are some disturbances, and not everyone appreciates what you're trying to do. You might feel that, for example, your family are pressurizing you. They want you to pay them more attention, and they don't want you to drift off, on your own tangent, as you could. I mean, by all means, listen to your family, but you also have to recognize that they have their own agenda, and their agenda is not necessarily the same as yours, and what your family want from you is not necessarily entirely real, and you have to be authentic, and you have to really understand what you believe in, and what is important. Now, the moon has changed sign. So we had a new moon yesterday in Scorpio, but now the moon is in Sagittarius. Moon is making a conjunction to Mars in Sagittarius, and you might say that Moon-Mars conjunction means that some of the pressure is off. You're not quite so focused on yourself and your own private needs, and you can maybe afford to sort of bring some more variety into your life. And also with this Moon Mars and Sagittarius, think about what is important to you, what really makes you feel good about yourself. How can you feel that you are doing the right thing and you're using your gifts correctly? And I think that may be one aspect of the Moon-Mars conjunction, doing something that is useful, and that is also something that you enjoy. And when you're doing something you enjoy, when you're reveling in it all, then you're creating a certain persona. You're creating the right persona. You're coming over as someone who people want to know. You are in your own way quite attractive at the moment, and you're going to be particularly attractive when you're having fun, not when you're feeling that you're being disrupted, when you have to make a special effort to accommodate other people and it's a real bore and you don't want to do it. No, when you're relaxed and when you're spontaneous, that's when your attractiveness really does come into its own, and everyone can benefit. You can shine a light on everyone, and so you can be a fun person and to have around, and people will like you and they'll just be attracted to you, and that's what you should be working on over the course of the day. But you don't have to work on it too hard. I mean, it should be all very sort of natural and spontaneous. Virgo. We have a situation where you would like things to happen in a particular way. And you've been thinking about this, and you think it should happen. And you may have quite a high degree of confidence. And, one question, we might have is your confidence, misplaced? I mean, it is possible, Virgo, that there may be a couple of things that right now you're being over optimistic about. You just think they're going to work out, and maybe you haven't got an alternative plan. So, Virgo, if you're banking on something happening, make sure that you do have an alternative. I'm not saying that this thing that you want to happen is just not going to happen. I'm not saying that you're going to necessarily be disappointed, but I think that you should just consider the possibility that things don't work out, because what you don't want to happen, Virgo, is to be sort of caught up in sort of a great knots of faith. Faith can be a real problem. Particularly if it's faith that's based on nothing, which requires something to happen in the real world for it to be confirmed. So if you're in that situation, you constantly start thinking about your favorite result, then there just could be something wrong. So try to be as realistic as possible. It is difficult to be realistic right now for everyone, and one reason for that is that we have got no planets in Earth signs at the moment. Well, except for Uranus, but Uranus is a transpersonal planet. It's it's not personal. It's a discovered planet. So I don't think that Uranus fully counts, and so you know, making sure that you are grounded and that your expectations are grounded. I do think is very important. I mean, I'm sorry to be rather negative about it, but I think it just does need to be said. On the other hand, if there are there's a different way of looking at things, and many Virgos can transcend. They can get in touch with something which is quite beyond them, and you then have to think, where is the best place to have faith? I mean, if you have faith in a material result, then that doesn't seem to me to be great. If you have faith in something beyond you, religious faith, spiritual faith, well, I don't think that's so bad. That's okay, and it's something that you might really benefit from. It's not all about you. It's all about something else, or at least it's partially about something else. And you can afford to relax, perhaps, because something is making sure that it's all going to work out. But don't relax to the point of complacency, because complacency is never a bad idea, and is never a good idea. You have to try as hard as you can to be proactive. Perhaps you have faith, you believe something is going to work out, but you might also believe that if you really want it to work out, you have to put in some effort as well, and that is probably the right way of dealing with today. Libra, you possibly have things to say. You've probably got quite a lot of things to say. Things had been trapped for some time. You may have just found that it was just impossible to communicate, what was bothering you, or indeed what was interesting you. But now that the moon has changed sign, and the moon is in Sagittarius, and it's making a conjunction to Mars, I think it's going to be just much easier for you to not just be yourself, but to be quite a sort of a hyped up version of yourself, almost an exaggerated person of yourself. It can happen, and you can be very clear about who you are and what you want, and you're not afraid of being fairly free with your opinions. And I think if you are open and honest, I think that it will probably be appreciated. That is at the moment what people want. And furthermore, Libra, I do think that you do have quite a lot of energy at the moment. More energy than usual. So if you throw your energy into your favorite pursuits, then I think that you will get noticed, and I think many people are just going to be impressed. This is what they want to see. So I'm quite optimistic about that. Though, one problem we do have today, I mean, it's not just your problem, it's just everyone's problem, is the fact there isn't much in earth signs. We've got Uranus in Taurus, we've got the South Node in Virgo, but is it really good enough? And it could be, Libra, that you feel there's just a certain lack of grounding, a lack of connection, and so you perhaps need to make a special effort to focus on the real world and what is important in the real world. And it is boring having to worry about whatever we need, whether it's money, material security, whatever. And with the Sun opposition Uranus, it might be that you're trying to make some headway financially, and or at least you're trying to understand what's going on. I mean, that's always a good thing to do, but you try to understand what's going on, but then things happen. Things become complicated. maybe as soon as you start looking at something, then the system sort of speaks back. It's not just a passive process looking at an Excel spreadsheet. The system knows that you're looking. The system knows that money is something that you're thinking about, and the system can just throw something your way. It needn't be a problem. It's just going to be just a time, Libra, where you might be confused and your financial situation may for a short period of time feel as if it's under a cloud. But I'm not trying to frighten you or anything. It is to a great extent the way you feel. But if that's the way you feel about your resources, then I think that it's important that you honor those feelings. And it's important that you are as relaxed as possible. And if you're sort of privately concerned about money and you're not doing anything about it, then that's not good. But on the other hand, if you make an effort to understand, I think that effort will be rewarded. And also, once you have decided, Libra, that something is important, and I'm not just talking about money, it could be anything, whatever you think is important, and you really give it your best shot, then you're going to be able to apply huge amounts of energy. And because of all this energy, I think there's a good chance that you're going to get your way. And if you have set yourself today, a set of goals, things you want to achieve, and I think there's a very good chance that you will achieve everything, and perhaps even more, despite the fact that Mercury is retrograde. Yeah, I know Mercury is retrograde, but we can't obsess about Mercury being retrograde all the time. And I think that today, Libra, you can, accomplish a great deal. Scorpio. The Sun is getting ready to leave Scorpio, getting ready to move into Sagittarius. And if you're in the Americas, then this evening the Sun moves out of Scorpio into Sagittarius. And the Sun, while it's in Scorpio, it does make an opposition to Uranus. So the Sun, late Scorpio, in your sign, smashes into Uranus. And the Sun just represents you. It represents how you want to light up the world, what you want to do, what kind of attention you want. It's very, very much about yourself. So when the Sun is opposition Uranus, there could be a surprise. There could be something that may feel threatening. It may feel as if it's trying to undermine you, especially as Neptune is making a trine to the Sun as well. So the Sun, very late Scorpio, making a trine to Neptune, making an opposition to Uranus. There's just something that you don't fully understand, that's difficult to grapple with. And it could be another person, the way another person is behaving. In a way, that would make things easier. At least you can focus on another person, and this is what it's all about. But it just could be something more collective, something beyond your sort of immediate attention, that it's important, but you can't fully see it through. So the Sun opposition Uranus means that you have to be patient. And people do have their idiosyncrasies. They do weird stuff. That is part of human nature. And it's important, not to be phased, not to feel that your path is being completely disrupted, because Scorpio, it's not. In reality, everything, is fine, and, you have a good sense of what is important. We do have, a conjunction between the Moon and Mars, and the Moon is, encouraging you to, take action, to take the right action, to look after your own interests. And, you can look after your own interests in quite a spectacular way. in a way that could be quite fiery. With the moon Mars making that conjunction in Sagittarius, and you do something that no one was expecting. You perhaps appear just out of nowhere, and you are very present. And because you are very present, and maybe you're having particular demands while you're very present, I think that you'll get a response which is quite pleasing. And I think that if you really want something, Scorpio, if you really want another person to agree to something, then I think that you can, force through your agenda, whatever that agenda might be. Sagittarius, the sun is getting ready to move into your sign. Tomorrow, Saturday, the sun will be in Sagittarius. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then late this evening, the sun moves into Sagittarius. And this is happening at a time when we've got the moon and Mars in Sagittarius, and I think it's something that maybe you've been waiting for some time, looking forward for the sun to enter your sign. And with the Sagittarius season upon you, then I think that things are going to start moving. You'll find that it's just easier to make an impact, and if you want to be yourself, you want to be exciting, perhaps you have things you just want to say, you don't want to have to feel too self-conscious about it. With the sun moving into Sagittarius, it just makes it all so much easier. And even while the sun is in Scorpio, like for most of today, probably all of us today, if you're not in the Americas, there's still a moon-Mars conjunction in Sagittarius in your sign. And I think that this moon-Mars conjunction is going to, allow you to certainly be clear about who you are and what you want, and also clear about what you don't like. You do have your likes and dislikes, and if something upsets you or you want to make some criticism, I think you're going to be very good at that. You'll put people in a position where they really do just have to understand, and it's because maybe you're communicating with the moon rather than with Mercury, because the moon and the Mercury are the two communication planets, and sort of Mercury at the moment is in Scorpio, is combust the sun in Scorpio. So if there is any communication today, it's likely to be more with the moon, and the moon represents a spontaneous kind of communication that perhaps comes from the heart rather than the mind. You don't have to think it through. It just happens, all very sort of naturally. Of course, Donald Trump has the moon in Sagittarius, and he has his Mercury in Cancers, and I often think that Donald Trump does communicate with his moon and not with that Mercury in Cancer. But I don't want to talk about Donald Trump too much. I don't know what you think about him. A very divisive character, obviously, but he does still illustrate the point that the moon is a communication planet, and so if you do have something to say, it is best, if at all possible, if you can speak from the heart. Don't think about it too much. Let the words just flow, and that just might be the best way of making an impact and getting people to take you seriously. I mean, people are going to take you seriously anyway. I mean, you shouldn't worry about that. And certainly once the sun moves into Sagittarius, you really will be, at center stage. And so that's one element of what's going on today, and maybe that's what you should be focusing on. Though the sun, just before it moves into Sagittarius, it does make an opposition to Uranus, and this Sun opposition Uranus may just stir things up. I mean, the Sun opposition Uranus could represent a time when things are happening when things are being disrupted, it's not necessarily personal to you, but you can see the disruption, you can see the change. And you can also see that some people are resisting this change. And then, Sagittarius, here's the question, well, what are you going to do about it? Do you want to resist the change? I mean, that's not necessarily a particularly Sagittarian thing to do. Do you want to become part of the change? And so you don't have to necessarily just be a passive observer with this Sun opposition Uranus. But if you do start to change things, you have to be able to deal with the consequences. You might find that your entire routine is turned upside down. You think you agree to something, you sign up to the revolution, but once you've signed up to the revolution, well, all sorts of things can happen. And you might have to change this, and something else has to change, and before you know it, your entire routine has been completely turned upside down. Maybe that's something you want, but it could be quite exhausting. So if you want to play safe, then maybe change should be treated with a degree of caution, because once you change one thing, you'll have to change something else and something else, and in the end, you could just be exhausted by this whole continuous process of, what do they call it, perpetual revolution. Do you want perpetual revolution? Possibly not. Capricorn. There is a conjunction between the Moon and Mars, and Moon is relevant. I mean, Moon is, after all, ruler of Cancer, and Cancer is your opposite sign. So with this Moon-Mars conjunction, there just may be things going on. And when you think about Moon-Mars, you might think about disruption, things being changed, and people behaving in a particular way that wasn't necessarily expected. And at the same time, not everyone is being very clear. So you had expected people to be clear and to announce their intentions, tell you what they're going to do, tell you about their plans, but that might not be how it works out. So, if things do happen today, it probably relates to that Moon-Mars conjunction. Particularly if we're talking about things that you hadn't properly prepared for, and it just could be someone else's behaviour, which it could be annoying, but I don't think it need be too annoying. And perhaps you have to recognise that certain people are trying to establish their identity, and they don't really know how to establish their identity, so they have to do something spectacular, or at least try to do something spectacular, although from your perspective it might all seem to be rather clumsy. But don't get upset about it, and instead try to understand what's going on, and try to consider your own contribution, because Capricorn, you do have a contribution to make, and this contribution may be about your ideas and your particular view, and you certainly do have something to say, and you have ideas which you want to tell people about. And if you are allowed to be open and honest, then I think that you can have quite an important impact, and you can make certain people feel good about themselves, and you can be an optimist. I mean, I know that Capricorn is not known for being one of the most optimistic of the 12 signs, but you can be an optimist, and you can help other people be optimistic about whatever they're trying to do. And that might be what their erratic behavior is about. Maybe people are erratic because they're feeling frustrated, and rather than just get annoyed with people's erratic behavior, perhaps you need to understand why. and you give people hope. You can give people hope, and it's all about talking about things, discussing things, you giving feedback, and you giving positive feedback. Because right now, that is very much, something you can do, and your ideas are really on great form. So if you're trying to plan something, trying to make a success of something, you certainly can, because of your ideas. And your ideas, are special. It's not just because your ideas are in themselves quite brilliant, but it's because they're grounded in reality. They are the ideas of a Capricorn, and that's what counts. So if you see something that seems difficult, you can find a solution, and I think that your solutions, Capricorn, can be really great. Aquarius. Well, Aquarius, we have the Sun opposition Uranus, and this opposition between the Sun and Uranus could well be important. I mean, it is Uranus, and when we're talking about Uranus, Aquarius, remember, this planet Uranus is something that you have an association with Uranus. But, as you will know if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, that I do not believe that Uranus is your ruler. I do, nonetheless, I won't say believe, but I think I'm of the opinion that Uranus has an association with Aquarius. So, that means that, when the Sun is opposition Uranus, you're likely to feel it. It's likely to have an impact upon you. And Uranus is in quite an important angle in your chart. It's in a part of the chart connected with the home and with your family. And Uranus has recently retrograded back into Taurus, and it just could be that there's unfinished business regarding your home. Perhaps you felt that some changes were required, and you had long enough to make those changes, perhaps years, but maybe you didn't quite get it together, maybe you didn't quite see it through. And Uranus's movement through Taurus over the next few months, I think it leaves Taurus and goes into Gemini, off the top of my head, at the end of April, something like that. And so with the Sun opposition Uranus, something might manifest, and you might be aware of a conflict. The Sun in Scorpio, that can be your ambitions. You want to move forward, and you're full of desire, and you can just see the end result. You can feel the end result, yet there's something holding you back, and it is Uranus, and that's the nature of this Sun-Uranus opposition. And this Sun-Uranus opposition is really a continuation of yesterday's new moon. It's a kind of all part of the same process. And I think that with Sun opposition Uranus, there just may have been something you were forgetting. You thought that something could be just glossed over, and it can't be glossed over, and you may have to sort of go to the sort of roots of the matter, and to look at how things are changing. And you've got to feel secure. You've got to feel that there's something you can always go back to. And if the thing you're going back to is not in a good condition, then that is not satisfactory. And so maybe that's what Uranus is reminding you to do, to sort something out relating to your home and your family, and being ready to make some big changes. You hadn't wanted to make those big changes, perhaps because it felt too complicated. But if you do feel that change is necessary, but you're perhaps in denial, then maybe now with Sun opposition Uranus, that will give you the impulse to for you to do whatever needs to be done. And this Sun opposition Uranus, well, it's also, you've got Sun trine Neptune, and you could say that the Sun opposition Uranus, Sun trine Neptune says something about other people's behavior, what people are doing, what people are up to. And other people have their own dramas. People close to you have their dramas, and they're looking for change, and they're not entirely happy with the way things are, and so other people want change as well, and that might be what the Sun opposition Uranus is about. And the Sun is also trine Neptune, and of course we've got the Uranus Neptune sextile, and so we perhaps get an idea of flux. Everyone is in flux. Everyone is changing. Everyone is feeling maybe that the old world is gone, and that's a shame. And now you've got to move on to something else. And there's no point in hanging around, sitting on the fence. And perhaps that's another way in which a Sun-Uranus opposition is working. And it's not just you being concerned about change, it's about other people being concerned about change, because change can be quite scary. And so do think about what it's about. Or you could say Sun opposition Uranus, it could be a person who is either afraid of change, or someone who wants to bring change in. And so the issue of change and resistance to change today, Aquarius, could be very important. And one other thing, Aquarius, there is a fair amount of negativity flying around. It's not your problem, but it's still there. And so what do you do about it? Do you give in to this negativity? If everyone's feeling negative, maybe you should feel negative as well. Well, I would not agree with that. I think that you're able to look at things in the best possible light, and your mind is on good form. You can distance yourself from the surrounding malaise and think about things in a new way, and see solutions, see how things could work, even if everyone else is down in the dumps. And this positivity is something, Aquarius, that you are able to transmit, and maybe it's needed, and you can get people to reframe their own ideas. They think it's all hopeless, but it's not all hopeless, and your vision can in the end be quite appealing. And so if you feel good about something, or you feel good about the world, or you feel that in spite of everything there is a definite possibility, perhaps that's something that you need to share. Pisces, there are things that you certainly want to accomplish, and in your own way you are you're quite adventurous. You can see possibilities, you can see how things could be, if you just gave them a chance, or maybe if other people gave them a chance. And what can you do? Well, what you can do is to be as imaginative as possible, and to think about possibilities. Possibilities really do matter. And so think about maybe moving quickly. So you have something you want to accomplish, and it's almost like in one step, with one leap, you can start to make it happen. And you certainly have the requisite enthusiasm and the drive. So don't hold back. This is a time to to make things happen. And you can be ever so slightly assertive. You can perhaps even be angry. That's okay. I mean, sometimes people have to be angry. They need that fire. And Pisces, at the moment, you can be that fire. I mean, I know that Pisces is not a fire sign, but there is something about you right now that is rather fiery, and can get people's attention, and also get people moving. And it's, it may just be a natural process. may not mean that you have to get annoyed. I mean, if you want to get annoyed, you can be annoyed, but maybe it's just a natural process where things can just naturally move and naturally move in your favor. So that's certainly a possibility. And today we've got two aspects. We've got Sun trine Neptune, Sun opposition Uranus. The Sun opposition Uranus, I mean, all things being equal, I would have expected the Sun opposition Uranus to be more powerful than Sun trine Neptune. And Sun opposition Uranus, as far as how you experience it, it could be about travel delays. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. We've still got Mercury retrograde. And so Sun opposition Uranus, just things happening. It's even like starting a journey. You think you're starting a journey. You want to start your journey in good time, but then you notice something, and you notice something else, and you have to attend to this, and you have to attend to that, and perhaps you start your journey late, and as a result, there might be time issues, and one thing can lead to another, and so traveling here could be difficult. And so if you are traveling, I think that you've got to be well organized, and you've got to leave plenty of time. And I mean, at least that is one way in which the Sun opposition Uranus aspect could work. And additionally, it's about your ideas and how you are feeling about things. You want to have a set of ideas that are coherent and make sense. But the Sun opposition Uranus could be disruptive. It could be intellectually disruptive. You become aware of something that just doesn't make sense. And where exactly do you fit it in terms of your worldview? So don't get too caught up with your worldview. Don't think that your worldview is absolutely permanent and can't be changed. Sometimes it has to be changed, and maybe that's what Uranus is doing. Uranus is presenting you with facts that you didn't necessarily want to hear about, but once you see them, well, what can you do? And then the Sun doesn't just make an opposition to Uranus; it makes a trine to Neptune. And I think that this trine to Neptune is probably pretty fortunate. Neptune is in Pisces, and Neptune is a planet which works quite well in this sign. And with a Sun trine Neptune, maybe something is just moving. It's just moving very easily and very quickly, and you can just get into the spirit of things, and just you go with it, and it may not be entirely clear about where it's going to end up, but you don't care. It is something of an adventure, and it might be, with Sun trine Neptune, an adventure which takes place in your imagination, but that doesn't mean that it's not a valid adventure. You might have inspirations, you might have ideas, you might have visions, and perhaps this can be facilitated by particular activities. I don't know, yoga, meditation, prayer. I mean, these are ways in which the Sun trine Neptune can work. But with Sun trine Neptune, it's important that Sun trine Neptune gets used in a spiritual environment, not in a material environment. Sun trine Neptune is not usually about the material world. And if you try to get mixed up with the material world, and you also try to transcend with the Sun trine Neptune, well, it could all become quite confusing. So maybe Pisces today, you've got a choice here. I mean, if you are ambitious, and there are things you really want to pursue, then you can be very successful. On the other hand, if you're in the mood for transcending, well, you don't really want to mix things up. And so perhaps the best way of handling the energies is to perhaps think about dividing up the time. There is a time to be spiritual, there's a time to be transcending, but there's also a time to be ambitious, a time to be really focused on your material goals and making the most of it. And so it's not really necessarily a question of just one, or the other. And those are my forecasts of the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 8, holding together. So when you look at this hexagram, you see a load of broken lines. So, all these lines are broken, except the fifth line. So the fifth line is sort of unbroken. And you could say that the fifth line is in a strong place. The fifth line from the bottom in a hexagram tends to be strong. So, perhaps the fifth line is just creating order. You've perhaps got these disparate elements. A lot of people not sure of themselves, a lot of elements not sure of themselves. They're not quite sure where they're going, but then the strength of that fifth line just does bring things together. And this hexagram, as its name suggests, holding together, means that we shouldn't be trying to do things on our own. We need to really collect what we have. Now there are a couple of ways of looking at this. Now you could argue that it's all about people holding together with other people. We need to ask who our friends are, who can help us, and so that might be one way of looking at it. But if we are not socially minded, does that mean this hexagram doesn't mean anything? I think that holding together could be about bringing everything together, bringing our resources together, making sure that everything is connected. And we might be faced with a rather chaotic situation. I mean, the Sun is opposition Uranus, but we can create that strength, and maybe that's what the fifth line the fifth unbroken line means. So we can create order out of chaos. We can bring together what we have and really make sure that it's all working well. But I think the I Ching is trying to think in terms of other people, suggesting that we should keep in mind where the connections lie, and how do we relate to other people. And now we have 3 moving lines here. We have the first bottom line moves, the second line moves, the fourth line moves, and so with these moving lines, it's all about honesty, and we have to keep in mind what we're all about. And it's not about personal gain. That's absolutely not what it's about. Holding together is about the collective benefit, and what people want to see is sincerity. They expect us to be sincere in the same way that we expect other people to show sincerity. Because how can you possibly hold together with people that aren't sincere, that aren't, if you like, committed to the cause? And the cause does go beyond the individual. So that's what you should be looking for. And it again, it's really important. It's not about personal gain, feeling that we're the ones to benefit from the situation. The idea is that everyone benefits from the situation, and there is certainly a place for loyalty here. Loyalty, everyone should be loyal to each other. I think that really does matter with this hexagram holding together. And because we've got 3 moving lines, we move to a different hexagram, and the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 58, which is the joyous. Now, it's the joyous because it's a lake over the lake. I mean, two trigrams, both representing the lake over the lake. So you think it's very watery. It's the positive aspect of water by and large. And so you might think that this creates a situation of happiness. And if you think about the previous hexagram, holding together, that could be about other people enjoying each other's company. And, that's very nice. And, we could get caught up with something, when there's lots of action going on, social action maybe, and, we get carried away. But with holding together, with the joyous, there's some danger that we could just get swept up in it all. We really could get swept up. This is quite a watery hexagram. And when you're dealing with water, water is treacherous. Water can, the tide can come in very quickly, and we're not paying attention, and then we can be stuck, and we can get overwhelmed, and we can get knocked over, into the sea, and so we have to be mindful. We don't want to get caught up in pleasure, leisure, anything like that. We have to always bear in mind what we're here for, what it's all about, and that's also true with the previous hexagram, holding together. We're not just holding together just to be social and have a party. We're holding together for a reason, and here there is a reason. However much people are having fun, we've got to be firm, and we must resist the temptation to just get carried away. I don't know, get drunk, whatever you're doing. That's not the right thing to do. You've got to be very aware, and in that way, you will then be setting a good example. And now I want to finish by looking at this opposition between the Sun and Uranus. So let's look at this opposition. Here it is. Sun opposition Uranus. Here it is. There it is. This is the precise moment of the Sun opposition Uranus. So this happens at 12:25 p.m. London time. That would be in the morning if you're in the Americas, in the evening, and if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And there is the Sun at 29:27 Scorpio, and the Uranus is at 29:27 Taurus. And so with the Sun opposition Uranus, you might think of some kind of a shock. That is a way of looking at it. Although when you're talking about Sun opposition Uranus, it's not necessarily a particularly unusual aspect. You get hard aspects between the Sun and the Uranus, pretty regularly over the course of the year. You get the squares, and you get the conjunctions, and you get semi-squares and sesquiquadrates. But perhaps this Sun opposition Uranus is particularly stark. Something doesn't want to budge, and it wants to hold firm, particularly as it's in fixed signs. And it is about something revolutionary, something that needs to happen, needs to change. And I think it's useful when you're looking at the Sun opposition Uranus to see it from a heliocentric view, because from a heliocentric view it is Earth conjunct Uranus, and that gives us an idea perhaps about the revolutionary concept of this Sun opposition Uranus. We are all thinking about change, and different people are going to have different ideas about change. Some people are going to relish the prospect of the revolution, of change. Others are going to be terrified of it. Others are going to want to really hold firm. And remember, that's the Sun, Uranus in fixed signs. You're not looking for change. We don't want to change. So that is a way in which it can manifest. Now, this Sun-Uranus opposition happens very close to the time of a Moon-Mars conjunction. So you can see in that chart, set for 12:25, London time, that the Moon and Mars are very, very close to the conjunction. I mean, if you want to know exactly what the time difference is between those two aspects, I would let me just tell you. So we've got Moon conjunct Mars at 11:13 in the morning, London time, and we have got Sun opposition Uranus at 12:25 in the afternoon, lunchtime. So the difference in time is 1 hour and 1 hour. There's an hour and 12 minutes difference. So they are very close to one another. And I know that the Moon-Mars conjunction is a fast-moving aspect, but you kind of feel that it's kind of getting locked into the Sun-Uranus opposition. So I think the fact that Moon-Uranus conjunction is so close at the time of the Sun-Uranus opposition just gives it extra spark, gives it sort of extra potential for causing disruption, and maybe also gives us an idea of violence, of radical change. And additionally, we shouldn't forget that this is happening quite close to the, or very close to the new moon. So we had a new moon yesterday. Today we've got Sun opposition Uranus. Today we've got Moon conjunct Mars. So it's kind of all part of the same thing. And furthermore, we've got Sun conjunct Mercury. So Mercury's combust. So it really does emphasize the point that things are happening, things are changing, and it's additionally we've got a grand trine. We've got a grand trine still involving the Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn. Mercury is now involved in this grand trine. So there is really a lot of activity today, and it's not just about Sun opposition Uranus. And the fact that it all comes together does mean that in theory, it should be quite an active day. And just because we've had the new moon, it doesn't mean to say that new moon is suddenly going to just cease operation. No, I mean that new moon is very much going to be with us. And I wanted to just look at a couple of people who might be affected by this new moon, and then I just want to give some examples of people who have Sun opposition Uranus in their horoscopes. And so one person who has been in the news for all the wrong reasons, who I think I talked about a couple of days ago, is Brian Kohberger. So today, November the 21st, is Brian Kohberger. So remember, Brian Kohberger was found guilty of murder. Well, he pleaded guilty to killing 4 students in Moscow, Idaho, and he sort of escaped the death penalty, but he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. And what happens in the life of a prisoner? I mean, I assume that he's under a lot of security, but is he being protected from himself, protected from other prisoners? And it is his birthday. So it is his 31st birthday. And so on the day of his birthday, he has got Sun opposition Uranus. Now that's quite a dangerous aspect if you're in prison, if you're in a maximum security prison. I mean, what is the next year going to be like for him? Because remember, this is sort of baked into his solar return. And so maybe he'll be in the news for one reason or another because of this, or it just may say something about his experiences in prison. And the person I sort of put on the thumbnail of this video was Emmanuel Macron. So Emmanuel Macron, he could well be affected by this new moon. sorry, the Sun opposition Uranus. So yeah, let me just show you Macron's chart. So Emmanuel Macron, being French, we always have a time of birth. That's a great thing with French births. Very easy to, somehow they always come with a time. And so the thing about Macron's chart is it's his midheaven. His midheaven is at 2921 Scorpio. So yesterday's new moon was on his midheaven. That's the first point. And also Mercury was on his midheaven. And then we've now got Sun opposition Uranus across his IC. So he's got Uranus on his IC, he's got Sun on his midheaven. So that really destabilizes things for him. I mean, I know that everyone has been predicting, the imminent collapse of France, or certainly the collapse of Macron, but he's still there. He's still sort of doing his manipulations. But this Sun opposition Uranus may force the pace. It may be about something happening which he wasn't fully prepared for. More changes in the government, or is it about his domestic situation? Because we do have his IC at 29 Taurus, so Uranus on his IC. So things at home, may not be great. We don't know what Brigitte is up to, but it doesn't look particularly stable. And there is a question: are we going to know how this Sun-Uranus opposition is working? We might never know. But I think that he might be someone who does come to even more prominence than usual. And when you're talking about Macron's chart, why I think that this Sun opposition Uranus may be especially important is because it hits a lot of stuff at 29. So he has got a Sun-Mercury conjunction at 29 Sagittarius. So this full moon is making a quincunx, sorry, not full moon. This Sun opposition Uranus, you've got Sun making a semi-sextile to his Sun-Mercury conjunction, and then you've got Uranus making a quincunx to his Sun-Mercury conjunction, plus it's across his midheaven. So he already has a Sun-Mercury conjunction semi-sextile his midheaven. So it really does stir things up, brings things to the fore. And so I think that I'm sort of quite interested in what happens with Macron, even the Moon-Uranus opposition he has in his chart. So he has a Moon-Uranus opposition in his horoscope, a very close Moon-Uranus opposition. So he might be quite sensitive to the Sun-Uranus opposition, especially as this Sun-Uranus opposition is making a 15-degree aspect to his Moon-Uranus opposition. So a 15-degree aspect. It is a micro aspect, but it all fits with a sort of a larger pattern. So I do think that Macron could be impacted, quite strongly by this Sun opposition Uranus, particularly as it just follows that new moon, so closely. And while we're talking about Macrons, we can't help but think about Candace Owens. So Candace Owens is someone who, she makes a lot of videos, she talks a lot, and she's the one who was putting forward the possibility that Brigitte Macron might not be a woman. And I think that there is this legal case. I haven't been following this legal case, but here is... where's Candace Owens' horoscope? Here is Candace Owens' horoscope. I don't have her time of birth. But Candace Owens has her Mercury at 29 Taurus. So Candace Owens' Mercury is on Emmanuel Macron's IC. So you could say the way she's thinking, the way she's communicating is hitting Emmanuel Macron quite hard at a quite fundamental level. That's why perhaps there is this legal action against her because of what she's been suggesting. But with Mercury, she's a Mercury person. She's got a lot to say, and so with Uranus on her Mercury, maybe she'll have even more to say. but there may be particular facts that she has to deal with, things that really might be surprising for her, even shocking, because Uranus being conjunct her Mercury. And a few other people, well, Zelensky, I've talked about Zelensky already, but there is the moment of Zelensky's inauguration, so when he became president. So when Zelensky became president, the sun was at 29 degrees Taurus, May the 20th, 2019. So you could say that this is a chart of the Zelensky presidency. So Uranus is conjunct the sun of the Zelensky presidency. The sun is opposition the sun. And, we already know that Zelensky is under a huge amount of pressure. There's been rumors that members of the government are starting to flee, and it's kind of linked with this corruption scandal that is really getting a lot of attention. And now we've got this story that Trump has a 28-point peace plan to deal with the Ukraine war. I don't know the full details, but one detail is the fact that Ukraine will will evacuate Luhansk and Donetsk, and I don't know what happens after that. I mean, do the front lines get frozen as well? But a lot of people in Europe and Ukraine are not going to be happy about that, even though if that's probably as good a deal as Ukraine's ever going to get. But yeah, so with Zelensky's inauguration, Uranus is right on his sun, and so that might be something important. And a couple of other people hit by this. Tucker Carlson, he seems to be in the news a lot. He's got his moon at 29 Taurus, so Uranus on his moon. In fact, he's got a moon-Neptune opposition, so he's got a Sun-Uranus opposition, transiting Sun-Uranus opposition on his moon-Neptune opposition. And he's got the moon in the 11th house. So it sort of hits his new moon, and so the moon might be something to do with his relationship to the public and his profile. Uranus on the moon may increase his profile. That's certainly one way of looking at it. And then Nigel Farage, leader of Reform, some saying that there's a possibility that he's going to become the next British Prime Minister, or maybe not the next one, but the one after, whoever has the most seats after the next election. And so Nigel Farage has his Venus at 29 Taurus. So Uranus is on his Venus. Venus might be about his reputation, how people see him. There could be a change. I mean, I know that a lot of the press have been recently trying to undermine him by making sort of allegations about what he said while he was at school, when he was a teenager, and trying to sort of hold it against him. And Keir Starmer saying, there are important questions to be said about Nigel Farage's opinions as a teenager and his pronouncements as a teenager. So that might all be part of it. But he certainly has Uranus conjunct his moon. Might say something about the women in his life, but we will have to see. And as with so many of these things, sure, there might be something going on, but are we ever going to see it? And finally, just a couple of events, people with that took place, at the time of the Sun-Uranus opposition. Well, as far as events are concerned, do you remember the FTX bankruptcy? Which FTX was this crypto company which Sam Bankman-Fried was in charge of. He's in a federal prison at the moment, and this bankruptcy really rocked the crypto world, the FTX sort of crisis. And there was, at the time of this bankruptcy, there was a Sun opposition Uranus. So this underlines the point that Sun opposition Uranus can be, important news. And when you've got Sun opposition Uranus, you get the idea of maybe things blowing up. And the gunpowder plot, when Guy Fawkes and others tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament on November the 5th. This chart is set for November the 15th. That's because this program insists on converting things. It prefers things to be converted to Gregorian, to the Gregorian calendar. So at the time of the gunpowder plot, the attempt to blow up the Houses of Parliament on November the 5th, 1605, the Sun was pretty close to an opposition of Uranus, which is completely fitting, even though Uranus wasn't discovered for the best part of 200 years afterwards. When was it? Sort of late, what was it, 1781? So a long time after the gunpowder plot. So Uranus is still working, well before its discovery. And it can also be about something really bad. I mean, with gunpowder plot, it depends on your view, I suppose. If you are a Catholic, you might have some sympathy for Guy Fawkes and the conspirators. That was a major motivation for it. But there is, the My Lai massacre in Vietnam in March 16th, 1968, when American troops massacred these villagers in the village of My Lai. I've set the chart for Saigon, but the coordinates are for My Lai. So don't worry, I haven't set the chart for Saigon. So at the time of the My Lai massacre, the Sun was at 25 Pisces, Uranus at 27 Virgo. So, I mean, that's a fitting description of Sun opposition Uranus, even though it's not, it's not at all pleasant, and can be a high-profile death with Sun opposition Uranus. So, so Steve Irwin was stung by the stingray. Remember the stingray? He was fine with snakes. He was fine with things which were terrestrial, even however deadly poisonous those snakes were. But when he went underwater and got close to a stingray, I think he got stabbed in the heart. And at the time of his death, the Sun was opposition Uranus. Sun at 11 degrees Virgo, Uranus at 12-13 Virgo, which sort of links with his chart. So he has his midheaven at 9 degrees Virgo, and of course we don't know for sure. Was he really born at 1 a.m.? He may not have been born exactly at 1 a.m. So the Sun-Uranus opposition was right on Steve Irwin's midheaven. When that event happened, and finally, a couple of people who have or had Sun opposition Uranus. The French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has a Sun-Uranus opposition in his chart, a very close Sun-Uranus opposition in his chart. And it may be that one manifestation of having a Sun-Uranus opposition in your chart is that you get attracted to unstable events. And being Prime Minister of France, when the government is in almost a sort of permanent state of collapse, seems to be a rather Sun-Uranus opposition kind of activity. So maybe that's one aspect of his life, so far, but things may have, further turns, further complications. And aside from him, Sun-Uranus opposition might say something about the nature of one's life and one's death. And so if you've got Sun-Uranus opposition, you might do something to stand out. And indeed, your death might in some way really stand out as something really, I don't say notable, but getting people's attention. So Oscar Romero, the Archbishop of San Salvador, who was murdered by right-wing death squads while saying a mass, he had Uranus in the 8th house. He had the Sun, a very, very, very close opposition between the Sun and Uranus. And he had, in fact, you had true black moon Lilith involved with it as well. So he had Sun conjunct true black moon Lilith opposition Uranus. And so, he may have manifested that Sun-Uranus opposition with, surprises as well, because I think before he became Archbishop, he was seen as being someone who was quite conservative. And it wasn't necessarily expected that he would go so far as to champion the poor and to stand up to the death squads and in such a fearless way. And also with Uranus in Uranus in the eighth, that does say something about his death, being shot while saying mass. And you can be someone who is assassinated, maybe with Sun opposition Uranus, but you can also be the assassin. And an example of an assassin with Sun opposition Uranus is David Frankfurter. David Frankfurter, he was born in Croatia, and he was in Switzerland just before the war, and there was a Nazi leader called Wilhelm Gustloff, I think, and David Frankfurter, he was Jewish. He saw this man, anti-Semitic politician in Switzerland, and he just sought him out, and he went into his office and shot him. And Frankfurter has Sun opposition Uranus, and as a result of that, he spent the rest of the war in prison, and which was probably the safest place for someone like him. If he'd been in Croatia during the Holocaust, he probably wouldn't have survived the war. But he spent the war in a Swiss prison, and as soon as the war was over, he was released. And I think that's just about it. Victoria Beckham, she's got Sun opposition Uranus. So here is Victoria Beckham's chart. Again, don't have a time of birth for her, but her Sun is opposition Uranus. That may say something about the men in her life. That may describe David Beckham. But it's also perhaps an exciting and creative aspect. Whatever you think of Victoria Beckham, there's no doubt that she's been incredibly successful. And maybe the Sun-Uranus opposition, did help. So those are all my thoughts on Sun opposition Uranus. Well, of course, I've got more thoughts, but I can't go on and on forever about it, can I? So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.